I'm Tim Portlock, and I make images about contemporary American cities using the vocabulary of 19th century American landscape painting, which is a genre of painting that talks about American identity through various visual conventions. I'm really interested in comparing and contrasting the meanings of these conventions about American identity with contemporary lived reality in American cities. I use digital tools to make these images. It's changed a little bit over time depending on developments in the technology, but basically what I do is I photograph cities that I'm interested in using as subject matter for the work. I use that as reference material, and I use 3D modeling programs to make assets or buildings or whatever, fire hydrants, cars, etc., that I arrange in my 3D modeling software. And then from these scenes that I create, I make digital prints. Right, my training, most of my formal training is as a painter in traditional art, and I was really into painting, and when I got out of school with my first master's degree, I made a living by painting murals and teaching sometimes. I started to think about the audience for the kind of art I would make for like public consumption, i.e. murals, versus the art I would make in my studio, which was geared more towards galleries and museums, or ideally museums at the time. And how these two different kinds of modes of art not only address different publics or different audiences, but the vocabulary I used for each type of mode was very different, right? So like art you make for a broad public has to be legible to a broad public, whereas art that you make for a museum or an art gallery, you can kind of assume that the audience that comes to those kinds of venues already have at least a little bit of a background in understanding art, or at least a willingness to learn. So I was thinking about these two modes, and the internet became popular for everyone. This is like the late 90s. And so the internet seemed like a way of resolving these two different modes that I was really invested in. And so I think in retrospect, people refer to that period as like the time of like techno-utopianism, for the internet at least. And so I had these ideas that you could make art in, you know, whatever kind of vocabulary you'd want to use, but it would be accessible to anyone around the world, right? So, so I taught myself internet technology, right? This was back when we had the term like webmaster, right? You could buy a book and you could learn pretty much everything there was to learn, at least with like making a web page. And then I sort of reached a ceiling for what I could do, and I decided that I needed to go to school to learn more advanced technology that wasn't in the books. And then I happened to go to school where they were working on something completely different at the time. And another thing that was happening that interested me was you could get a game on a CD-ROM at the time, and computer games were a really rich experience, and there was a lot of experimentation with storytelling. And I became really fascinated by games as a storytelling medium. So when I went to school at the place that developed the Cave virtual reality system, I kind of lost interest for the time being in the internet as an art medium, and became more interested or more invested in the Cave as a storytelling medium. I also feel like it was just an exciting time, like for this, that a lot of the vocabulary for making or using computers as a storytelling medium was being created. So like a lot of, at least for me, a lot of things seem new, or the idea of game studies, for example, at least as far as like computer game studies was really new. So you know, I felt like it was equivalent to using a camera when the, you know, photography had just been invented. And so that's how I made the transition from painting into digital art. And I think, you know, one other thing that changed is when I got out of school, I no longer had access to, you know, any kind of random expensive tool, like digital tool to make work. So I had to rethink how to, like, where to get the tools or adapt, you know, consumer level tools to make the kind of work that I was interested in making. And so that's another thing that has informed my tool choice, right? Is I can't afford like $1.5 million virtual reality display system, but I can buy a $50 computer game and pull the content out of it and put my own content into it. There are things that I do enjoy about making a 2D image that I think is not as emphasized with digital media. And so my choice of, like, I don't know, let's call it output, is, for me, has the things that I like from when I was painting, and then also has the things that I really appreciate from like digital media making. From like a practical perspective, so when I did graduate from EVL, I wanted to make interactive work, and it was just really labor intensive, right? And one of the things I don't like about being a traditional visual artist is like a very lonely gig, right? Like if you're in theater, you work with other people. If you work as an artist or a writer, you're alone a lot. So I like the idea of working with other people, but it's really hard unless there's like a lot of money involved to get the opportunity to work with other people or get people to like focus on the same thing. Like having people come together like in a voluntary, non-profit way it's just really hard. So like if I'm gonna work alone, I have to find a process that's manageable for one person. So one of the big sort of signature conventions of 19th century American landscape painting is like the sort of prismatic sky. Oftentimes there'll be this thing called God rays in addition to that. So like rays of light peeking through the clouds or whatever, these like really like improbable setups. Contemporary reality in American cities has changed since I started making these kinds of images. And so when I started out living in Philadelphia at the time, there wasn't a lot of new construction. Like I think the defining feature of the kind of American cities I was interested in was just disintegration. And then 10 years after the 2008 economic collapse, there was just a lot of construction going on in big cities, and a lot of like skyscrapers were going up with mirrored surfaces. And so it seemed like a way of acknowledging changes by having these reflective surfaces in my images that also were able to maintain a major element of the sort of landscape tradition. So like oftentimes, or all the time, that they're a reflective surface, they're reflecting the sky, right? Also that allows me to change the vantage point of the viewer a little bit. Like I can have the camera or the viewer look down a little bit more at the landscape, which gives me the opportunity to like play around with the kind of images I can make a little bit more than I was able to in the past. So I've been interested in alternate history and speculative fiction, sometimes known as science fiction. And I made an image. I was commissioned to make an image like a year ago to imagine a future without guns, or imagine a city, an American city, major American city that doesn't have guns. And I'd been thinking about making images like that for a while, but it was the first time I actually had to sit down and think that out, which I really like. And I really like storytelling that comments on our present by speculating what could have been different or what might happen in the future. So I think I'm going to make some more work like that. I'm teaching a class on game engines, or Unreal game engines specifically, and I've been thinking about this for a while, but not until 6 months ago in a serious way. I want to make I want to make a game about the blues, about based on blues mythology. It's kind of ironic that there's a movie that just came out last week, but I don't know. I've been interested in that for a while, and this sort of mythology of people selling their soul and making sacrifices, etc. I haven't figured out how the game mechanics would work for that and how I would get it done. I mean, given what I was just saying about like group projects, labor, distribution of labor and money, like I do like that there's a pretty robust indie game scene that didn't exist as such like 20 years ago. So I feel like there's probably a bigger degree of receptivity of making a game like that. What else? I just spent a year in Indonesia. I literally got back from there 4 days ago. And when I first got there, I wanted to make a stop motion animation about pollution of rivers in Java, and referencing like different modes of mythology that exist in Java. And then, yeah, I could see how maybe someone might look at my work in the near future and ask me if it was generated by AI. I mean, I make the kind of work that I think AI wants to make, but I think for now, images that are created by AI look like they were created by AI. There can be some stylistic variation, but it's very obvious to people, I think, that it was made by AI. There's just like, definitely I can see that the people who are making it, as they get more input, I can see it being more useful for someone like me. The discussion about AI, I think I just read like Sam Altman talking about how it's enabling anyone to be an artist, but I think what his idea of an artist is not what an artist is. I don't think like just giving instructions to software to give me an image, I don't think that's like what an artist is. I think there's someone responding to stuff happening in like contemporary society and commenting on that. And I guess I could theoretically, AI could get to that point where it could like go through a newspaper and decide like there's some cultural issue that's has some popular relevance, and that it's going to randomly go through the database of things and formulate some novel new combination of stuff to respond to that. But I don't see that happening for a very long time. Another random thought I have about this is, okay, let's say that AI is a creative thing in and of itself. I think it weirdly raises the bar for what creativity is for human beings. Like another way to think about it's like maybe creativity might be overrated if a computer program can do it, right? Like